Good afternoon, Michael Kendi. Thank you very much for your attendance this morning, and we're looking forward to getting the afternoon started with the panel Future Issues of Digital Trust. The morning was largely spent on current issues of trust and how they manifest themselves online and how other industries are dealing with them. Now we're going to start looking forward at future issues. Our moderator is Anne-Christine Fornage, Professor of Contract Law and Consumer Law at the University of Lausanne Law School. Anne-Christine, please.
Thank you. I welcome you all warmly to this panel. And I want to begin with a sentence of this morning said by Martin Vetterli. He told that in collaboration we trust. And it's very important collaboration between institutions, it's very important collaboration between people. And I want to say that we feel this atmosphere here at the Graduate Institute, and that this spirit will be the spirit of this panel. This panel has a prospective approach. The idea of the panel is to think about what will be the world in, let's say, 5, 10, 20 years, and how to face today to the issues of tomorrow. And first of all, the panel aimed to identify the issues of digital trust that will arise in the future and understand their impact with the expertise of each panelist. And then we will explore how to address these challenges and highlighting the potential of current solutions, but also discussing their limitation to imagine new solutions. And the first speaker will invite to discuss the identification of the issues of digital trust is Pascal Marmier. Pascal, I turn to you as you have an extensive experience in tech, innovation, and public trust. You are Secretary General of the Economy of Trust Foundation. It is a foundation launched and supported by SICPA to lead programs and build a community among innovators and thought leaders supporting resilient and sustainable economies. A concrete project is an innovation campus called Square One. This campus is being built to serve as a collaborative place to accelerate the development of the economy of trust. Before that, you spent close to 20 years as a diplomat focused on tech and innovation. You were the CEO and Vice Consul General of Switzerland in Shanghai at Swiss Next China. And you hold an LLM in business law from Boston University, and I must tell, last but not least, I must say that you are an alumni of the University of Lausanne, where you studied law, as I am a law professor from this university. I must underline that. Today, I would like to begin to ask you two questions. The first one is, which issues of digital trust should we expect to face in the future, and how do you think future digital tech will impact the material world?
Thank you so much. Delighted to be here. Congrats to the organizers, and special thanks to Michael, who's gathered this amazing lineup of speakers today. Thanks for the kind introduction. And thank you again also to those who contributed today. So as we are kind of looking forward on future issues, I hope I can provide a few observations and thoughts to kind of warm up the panel and obviously stimulate the discussion with the people that are coming here. I think we are at a time of a shift in digital, where especially on the topics that I'm looking at, public governance, trust, right? Governments have an important role to play. So to make the link with the regulation, we heard a couple of things that I think are holding very true. We'll certainly continue is, I think there's almost a user frustration. It's not so much user expectation. I think it's user frustration because we see how things go online, but there's a vast part of our lives that has not yet to the standards. So that's number one. The second one, and we heard it this morning as well, and I think it's going to continue to be really important, the role of government is to safeguard and I would say almost anticipate these public values. We talked about privacy today and having really a key role of almost anticipating what the next stages are going to be, right? And then the third one that I'd like to say, again, linked to the digital sovereignty, for me, a pretty crazy number I found when I was preparing this panel. 92% of all the data produced in the Western world is in the hand of the US, where I spent, as you say, quite a bit of time. But I found it really interesting because it means that in terms of thinking about data, not necessarily as ownership, but maybe as flow, I think there's a big role for governments and obviously other entities to think through. So that brings me to say that this link that I think you are alluding to, and Christine, between the digital and the material world is really, really important. I'm sure we're going to hear a bit more through Vincent about cyber warfare and cyber attack. We heard a bit today, but think about the day looking forward where the interaction with your doctor might not be a direct one, it might be through your digital twins, right? I mean, already now, I don't know how many of you have either Strava as an app or, you know, an Apple iWatch or something, but you're creating data where basically any kind of, I would say, machine might know maybe more than your current doctor, right? Think about the certification that will need to come there. Think about the trust you're going to have to put in some of these mechanisms, because the day where your digital twin has maybe an alert that goes to your doctor, but it's not the real one, I think you'll be in trouble. So I think there's really a big interest there to understand what's happening. Staying with the tech, I'm also a tech maybe enthusiast to a certain extent, but I think that the merging of some technology is really interesting. We did something recently on using DNA, the famous PCR that we all know now, as a way to authenticate products, for example. So knowing that my jacket, for example, was produced in a region that it says it is produced, right? So again, I think the realm of possibility. Food is another great example. When you start having PCR and sequencing that are in low-digit dollars, I think this opens a lot of also possibilities that are kind of very enthusiastic, and again, kind of regulations and others will be there. I think it's obviously, and we heard about this, also needs to be put into frameworks. We heard about trust by design. I'm sure that when we talk about IoT, we might hear more about IoT by design or security by design for IoT. Some of those frameworks obviously are also linked to some of the sustainability topics of the day, right? Something that we didn't talk today. I'm starting to also kind of get a bit more maybe aware of it, is what's the impact on climate change of moving our life to digital, right? We had 10% of GDP in the US linked to the digital economy. What happens when you go to 90%, right? Obviously, blockchain will have new, consensus. We're talking about different ways to reduce the impact of crypto money, but I think it's very interesting. So that's the first part. The second part, briefly, and again, this is thanks to the explosion of data, the industry is going to change. And as an industry changes, I was part, for example, of the insurance industry. One of the, I would say, kind of starting block or exploding factor was when McKinsey came in and say to a room of industry executive, and in an article, the insurance industry is not going to exist anymore. And everyone looked at it, and it's, I don't remember, I think it's 5 or 6% of the US industry. And the consultants were basically saying, well, you're in an age of ecosystem. So the data is going to flow maybe through the insurance, but it's going to be, again, kind of industries reorganized in ecosystems where the data flow and basically the boundaries between firms is going to become kind of so close that you should think differently. And I think what it means for government is you're going to have to think through, do you want to be a platform? Or do you want to let the system do it? And take the example these days. We can deep dive into it a bit later on. Think about crypto, right? Regulation is coming. We know it's coming. This is a bit the kind of decentralized finance, open source way of looking at changes there. Or you got the more proprietary way to look at it, which is in our language called CBDC, for central bank digital currency, where about 80% of the central banks are thinking about digital cash, with the Chinese experiment running its way, right? So I think there's dramatic changes to be done, and we'll explore solution a bit later on, but I think public-private partnership, again, are essential to doing these kind of things, and that's why I'm excited to be here and sharing with the rest of the panel.
Thank you very much, Pascal. Our second speaker is Anne-Marie Kermarrec, and she's a remarkable scientist. Since 2020, she leads the Scalable and Computing System Lab at EPFL. She has also experience in the private sector. She was the CEO of the Medigo startup that she founded in April 2015. Medigo provides content personalization services for online publishers and directly builds on her research. From 2004 to 2015, she was a research director at INRIA in France, where she graduated more than 20 PhD students, which is a very big record. Anne-Marie received also an impressive number of grants and awards. For example, the last one, and not least, is the French Légion d'honneur in 2019. And your research interest is focused on large-scale distributed systems, peer-to-peer networks, and system support for machine learning. So, Anne-Marie, do the challenges mentioned by Pascal resonate with you? And maybe could you tell us more about the conditions for AI and big data technologies to benefit the society as a whole?
So thank you very much. So hello to everyone. Good afternoon, and thank you very much for this nice introduction. And for the invite, I'm very happy to be here. So yes, indeed, many of the things that Pascal mentioned resonate in what I want to say. So I'm the computer scientist kind of part of this panel, and clearly the algorithms today are ruling our lives more or less. So they tell us what to watch, where to go, who to meet, whether what kind of study we should do. They translate some documents. Algorithms are also very extremely useful to, predict the weather, climate change, as a matter of fact, or assist or even replace doctors from time. So this is those things are extremely useful. So they've been made possible basically by the fact that AI algorithms are around and operational. Well, you have to remember that they have been around for a very long time. The only reason why you can use them now efficiently is because we have the available amount of data and the right computing systems to actually make them run. But somehow they generate as much enthusiasm as they raise concern and fear about a number of things. And one of the reasons is that those algorithms are not exactly transparent in a way. We do not know, and maybe we are more aware of a number of things, but an average user might not know exactly what's going on with data and why there is this output to a specific algorithm. And so the good thing with algorithms is that they do whatever we tell them to do in a way. So we could have some control about what we do, but yet we do not always know. So just take the example of a social media, which I guess I take it that you all are on some kind of social platform. Those social platforms, the commercial ones, basically their goal is to make sure that a user stays as long as possible on their platform, because this is the core of their business model, which is advertising driven. And to achieve this, basically, they select for you what kind of post you're going to see and what kind of messages, information, content, basically, you're going to see. And since they want you to be happy and to stay, well, they have no... They basically try to make you happy and put some content that you will click on. Meaning that, depending on who you are and what you're interested in, you might end up in very specific bubble of interest, and potentially goes to misinformation kind of bubble, which can be... So what I want to say here is that we know as computer scientists how to actually unbiased algorithm and make sure that we provide a fair view of the world of a number of things, but depending on in which hands those algorithms are, you don't really know what they output. And in that sense, so what can we do about it? So I think, going into, as Pascal said, government action about this and putting some regulation in place is a very good way to start, I would say. And especially as it goes with trying to work, and there's a lot of research on this, on explainable AI or ethical AI and stuff like this, to try to explain what why you get this output from an algorithm. And this is possible sometimes and very intuitive. This is not always possible and not always so intuitive. So there is a real effort here, I guess, from the community research community to understand what it is and to make sure to convey the right message. So that means that there is some kind of education as well to do on the user part. The other thing I wanted to mention, which also goes into what you were just saying a little bit later, is the fact that we now see, so we are in this very weird world where the main stakeholder are basically the ones who are not producing so much stuff. They're basically feeding their algorithms with stuff that we do produce, or or the nature produce, or whatever. So it means that this is very different from what the industry was before. When when you were in an industry, you would produce, I don't know, cars or stuff. Now you just gather something that some other people are sort of own and produce us, and then they make money on top of this. So I'm not saying that we should get rid of all of this, but having a complementary kind of systems where actually you can let the users get in control of what they have might be a good way to actually go into a direction, having an alternative where you can control what you're doing. And typically that's possible. I mean, you mentioned, peer-to-peer system, and this is a little bit what's going on with blockchain, but you can pretty much do the same with, federated or decentralized learning, where basically the data stays where it's produced, typically on your mobile phone or on your own profile, and then you exchange only what is necessary for an AI algorithm to learn and train a global model. And that, I think, are some avenues that are promising for the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anne-Marie. And it gives me the occasion to present the third speaker. The third speaker is Vincent Lenders. Vincent, you have been working for 13 years at the Federal Office for Defense Procurement, and during this time you were responsible for the development of various cyber security concepts for the operational systems of the Swiss Air Force. You had led the Defense Research Program on Cyber and Information, and since 2019 you are the director of the Cyber Defense Campus, bringing together key Swiss stakeholders in research and innovation from government, academia, and industry. Vincent, recent cybersecurity incidents revealed vulnerabilities in infrastructure security. I think about ROL, or last week the problem with the Montreux public entity. So people speak about cyber warfare. Maybe you can explain us what is cyber warfare and how does cyber warfare relate to digital trust?
So thank you very much for this introduction. Also, I'm very happy to be here and share some insights also on cyber warfare and digital trust in general. So you refer to the attacks on the municipalities of Rolle and Montreux, and I would not call these acts of warfare, but more general acts of cybercrime. So these were ransomware attacks where criminals, cyber criminals, want to have some financial gain and attacking today more or less randomly or arbitrarily different organizations and try to get as much money as they can with this ransomware. And so these attacks are typically not targeted, so they are really trying to find the weakest links and try to exploit them and get some money out of it. So this is of course concerning, but it's not what I would call cyber warfare. So cyber warfare, on the other hand, how people typically define it is attacks on nation states that are really targeted, part of a conflict or for nation state interests that could cause, of course, damage, also physical harm in the country, and also up to death of people. So if you look now at where we stand today, or how cyber warfare started, cyber warfare was in the Middle Age. Basically, the battlefield was either on the land or in the sea. That's where the warfare was happening. Then at the beginning of the 20th century, the aircraft were invented, and suddenly there was a third dimension that you could also exploit the air to perform some warfare. And then we know what happened also then in the world wars. So suddenly it was a new dimension that was being used. Now, in the beginning of this 21st century, we have a new dimension that is opening up, and this is the cyberspace. And now this is also what militaries are now thinking of exploiting or using as a fourth dimension to perform some cyber operations. Now, this new dimension opens new threats, of course, but at the same time the other dimension still remain the same, of course. And if you look at military doctrines around the world, they typically see the cyber domain as an additional dimension, how they want to perform their military operations, basically. Now, if you look at the NATO, for example, NATO has around now 80% of the NATO countries have built a cyber command or a cyber force to perform cyber operations. This can be defensive, that they are there to defend their own systems, digital systems, but also offensive cyber operations to be able to intrude or to hack into systems of others. So this is what's happening. So 80%, it's quite a large number. So basically, we see development that almost every country is trying to build such a cyber force nowadays. Now in Switzerland, there are also plans, and the Federal Council has issued a cyber strategy this year to build a cyber command in the armed forces of Switzerland. And by 2024, this new cyber command should be also into place to defend Switzerland and the army in the cyberspace, and also to be able to perform cyber actions in the cyber domain. So now coming back to the question, what's also the relationship between cyber warfare and digital trust? And I think that there's a high relationship because the cyberspace is really interconnected. Also, all systems there are somehow connected. Also, it's a global system. There are no borders, international. I mean, it's not like countries which are borders. In cyberspace, everything is somehow interconnected. So when a military organization performs a cyber operation, it's in the same cyberspace as the civil systems and all other systems we have. On the other hand, if a criminal organization tries some ransomware attack, it's also in the same space, so everything there happens at the same in the same environment. So now we have seen in Switzerland attacks, for example, this year on the government, on municipalities. Next year, what will happen next year, we don't know. It can be maybe untargeted attacks that target or that by chance hit the power grid or the water supply or any critical infrastructure in Switzerland, and then of course this could have also more severe impact. So that's the situation we have today, and the threats are increasing. We see every year we see more of these attacks. There is the National Center in Switzerland for Cybersecurity that monitors, and organization can report the number of attacks, and we have there roughly 300 reports per week, which is quite high. Of course, not every report may be a very severe incident, but it shows a trend, and every year this is increasing. So there we have also almost an exponential increase of things that are going on. So that's the current state, and so we need to, of course, see how we can build, how we can secure our environments, and now also how we can build more trusted systems.
Thank you, Vincent. Thank you very much. And our last speaker is Nabil Hamzi. Nabil Hamzi will tell us more about Internet of Things, because the emergence of IoT also has led to concerns related to privacy and security. So you are working as a security architect in the CTO office, supporting all products and services provided to Logitech's customers. And you are leading the product security efforts in this enterprise. You introduced security by design. You will tell us more about this topic into the software development's life cycle, from security requirements up to the final security review board. Prior to joining Logitech, you were Solutions Security and Certifications Manager for Ingenico. You were dealing with payment transaction, key management, and PCI, payment card industry, certification for banks all over the world. And you joined Ingenico as a cryptography expert, where you were responsible for supporting the implementation of solutions that met the standards of payment industry. Finally, you spent more than 7 years working for Gemalto, where you implemented secure cryptography libraries for banking and telecom smart cards. Nabil, you hold a master's degree in cryptology from the Paris Denis Diderot University, which you got in 2008. So, may I ask you, do you share Vincent's view on the risk of cyber attacks, and which issues will be specific to the IoT?
Thank you. Thanks for the introduction and thanks for the invitation. I'm very glad to be here as a speaker. And yeah, for sure, I'm sharing Vincent's thoughts and view on cybersecurity and cyber risks. We know that everything is connected today through web platforms, but also through our devices that we hold. And we kind of hold internet in our hands. So, but let's get back to the definition of Internet of Things, because I mean, we heard a lot of IoT and what is IoT devices. So IoT devices are devices that are connected to a network. It might be connected to internet or to a local network. And it has some sensors, it has some microcontrollers. They are often small, but not always. When we talk about smart cars, typically this is huge, or smart fridge. I mean, they are powered and they don't have any batteries, but still they have low consumptions, low resources, and low footprint. And they are running softwares to manage and process data to interact with their environment. And I mean, why I'm talking about this definition? Because IoT is quite different from cybersecurity. Even though the process of securing an IoT device is the same, you need to understand the threats, you need to assess your risk, you need to implement the security controls, to have a strong security testing posture, and to maintain your device or your web platform. For IoT, the security controls are quite different, because an IoT device has to integrate into users' lifestyle. You want to plug it and to forget, right? You just, you don't want to plug your watch to your computer to get software updates each morning, but still, your watch or your fridge or any other smart device runs software that has to be updated and to maintain the security state. So, what is the main difference in terms of cyber security and IoT security? Just think about, your bank, your web application, where when you connect to your bank to check your accounts, they will not adopt the plug and forget mantra, right? They will monitor the activity. They will have some alert management on when people will try to brute force some passwords, or they will update the credentials of the users, but also of administrators. But for an IoT device, often you don't have that. You don't have that maintenance, that security updates. And I'm talking a lot about security because for me, security feeds the trust. Without security, it's easily to lose trust on companies and on devices. And this is quite difficult to talk about IoT trust as a whole, because there is a lot of manufacturers, a lot of devices. I talked about smart fridge, but there is smart locks. I mean, everything that starts with smart, it's typically an IoT device. There is smart bubbles, smart, I mean, you have everything as an IoT device. And you cannot just say that we trust IoT as a whole. You have to understand that some devices has to be very secure, such as medical devices that are connected wirelessly to device or to smartphones to monitor your insulin or to monitor your heartbeat. So you cannot secure a smartwatch as a smart medical device. So when it comes to regulations, to certifications, and to label, you have to split and to understand that you have to deal with these families of devices. And the trust will either come from regulation and countries or from manufacturers, because you will trust a brand saying that, okay, I will buy those devices because I trust that brand. But the trust has to come from away.
Thank you, Nabil. Thank you. So we move now to the second part of the discussion, that is think about solutions. And I would like to explore the technical side of this part of the solutions we can maybe draw, probably not find today because it's prospective. But how do you fields of expertise address the challenges that we have discussed so far and contribute to building trust? And I raise the question to Anne-Marie at first, and then to Pascal.
So can you say that again, please?
Yes. How do you relate your field of expertise to identify the solutions that the challenges we have seen for the future for digital trust?
Yeah, well, again, as I said, I think so I'm not that much into the cybersecurity, which I think it's a real issue, and I think this will obviously is covered by research also in this area, and that's a very important one. Again, I think in terms of expertise that are needed to address these challenges, you have to really have a tight action, which is a tightly coupled action between computer scientists, obviously, both in the security, privacy, algorithms, and systems, and all these people, but also typically government, as Pascal mentioned, and probably even more than that, with also companies and having private and public kind of collaboration to come up with some reasonable, trade-off in these kind of things. Yeah, so I guess this is.
One point. And Pascal?
Yeah, so maybe on the technical side, I would make a distinction between the physical digital element and maybe taking IoT as an example, and the purely digital, which maybe might be more the field of Anne-Marie. I think on the physical to digital, we're just scraping the surface. I mean, when we think that there's just like no almost visibility of where your food is coming from, what's in it, there's a lot of I would say, kind of unmet expectations from consumers there. And I think we're going to see an explosion on people kind of using apps to get a better feel on whether their food comes from the nearby farm and if it's really kind of bio as said on the label. So I think we're going to see a lot of this. And then you can think of food, but you could think of the rest of the supply chain that's coming, right? We all see the supply chain issues now that are affecting everything from, bike to obviously chips in a lot of things. But think about the future of it, where, again, I think the sustainability will be embedded into these supply chains, and therefore you'll see systems, probably not to use the keyword blockchain, but probably something that's open, that you can kind of trust, verify, right? So I think on this physical and digital, you'll see a lot of development in the future. Again, to be seen if it's manufacturer driven, if it's regulation driven, but I think there's a lot of development. And then into your field, and Marie, I don't know if you would agree, but I think data is just a mess. It's just such a chaos, right? I have to say, even myself, I don't know where my data is, right? I come back to Switzerland, and I'm sure that there's like pieces of my data all over the place. So it's just not a sustainable part, right? And in the future, I don't see why there couldn't be markers in data, right? The data is still always produced somewhere, consumed somewhere, it flows somewhere, right? So this ability of somehow putting tags or marker in data, I think will make a big difference, especially for certain fields where privacy is even more important than some others. So just a couple of thoughts looking forward, but I think the technical solutions are there. I'm sure we're going to talk next a bit more about the ways to do them, but I'm pretty positive about developments in tech on that side.
And Vincent, do you share this optimism? Do you think that it's this morning the word oxymoron was used to speak about security and to speak about digital invulnerability? Do you think it is true, or isn't it?
Yeah, it's like the question also about digital trust, right? It's also if it's possible to establish digital trust or not, because of course many per se digital systems have vulnerabilities. So if you look at software, for example, that we develop, it's very, very hard to develop software that has no bugs. I mean, it's possible to do some formal verification of software. If the software has a certain line of codes, like 10,000 maybe, then it's still possible to do, but every also a small IoT device we have, there are so many lines of codes that we can not even verify if they have bugs or vulnerabilities. So I think that's a big issue. So we have no way of proving the security or the trust level of a device at the moment. We can have certification, but this is also not the proof. It's just basically we have done certain things, and best practices also. That's one aspect. So yeah, so I think what we are doing on our side, I mean, there is on the one side, there is an exponential increase of digitalization that we have observed also with the pandemic. This has increased, but it will continue to increase. But on the other side at the moment, this is almost also an exponential increase of threats and attacks. So it puts us in a very difficult situation. So there are a lot of new opportunities and new ways how we can do some digital business, but on the other side, there are also a lot of threats. So I think what we are trying to do is we need to better understand the threats and opportunities. We're doing this with research. At the Cyber Defense Campus, we have also research programs to understand better this dimension. But also what is also very important is not only about talking about the technology, it's also talking about the people and the talent. Because also in this cybersecurity, cyber defense, it's also very important to have the right people, because they do the right things. You need to also understand complex things. So that's why what we're also doing is also have programs also to build up and develop also talents in this area, because there will be a huge shortage of talents. And if we want to build digital trust, cybersecurity, we will need a lot of people also in Switzerland to do this. And at the moment, it's not clear how this talent will be there in the next 10, 20 years.
Thank you very much. And you gave us some ideas. What is the security of products, Nabil? Maybe you can develop a little bit on the system of certification, what it is, and where we are now, and what do you expect for the future that could be the good situation to have more trust?
Yes. So in terms of certification, there is a lot of framework out there. I think that one of the most adopted one is from ETSI. I forget the name. I think it's 303.645. It's a complex sequence of number, but it is used to assess the security of a device through the whole development life cycle. So how you assess the risk, how you implement the security controls, and how you test it. And as I said, you do not secure an IoT device as a cyber security, as a web services. Typically, if you take the example of software integrity, when you buy a device, you assume that this device is safe, right? You just use it, you plug it to your computer, connect it to your home network. But you don't know what happened during its delivery or during its packaging or during the manufacturing line. You don't know if someone just changed or tempered that device. So, and this is part of the trust. I mean, trusting a device or trusting a manufacturer, it's trusting the whole life cycle of from the manufacturing to the development to the shipment. So as Logitech and as manufacturer, we have to think about those threats. But also, when you are certifying a product, you have to provide such evidences that you have thought about it and that you have put the right security controls in your devices. So security by design is a thing. Integrating security in the development and in the manufacturing of the device is a thing. But as Vincent said, software contains bugs, and whatever you do in securing and reducing the security bug of a software component, it will still contain some bugs, or if it's not today, it will be tomorrow. So we need to react, and I think that building some quick reaction or in security incidents provide trust to customers, because you will have that transparency saying, okay, yes, we have been attacked. Yes, we had some vulnerabilities. You can limit the impact of vulnerabilities by adding security layers, but still it's a vulnerability, so you have to address it in a transparent way and in a quick, as soon as possible. So I think, yeah, even if we have certification and regulation, we need also to build the monitoring and the maintenance phase of a product. You cannot just deploy product and forget about them.
Yes, you speak about security by design. Is it a way, if we speak about security by default, for example?
For me, it's two different concepts. So to talk about security by default, you need to have somehow security somewhere. And security by default, it's a concept where you will configure your service or your product to enable security by default. Typically, we all have smartphones, and when we install an application, the security by default is to disable microphone and location permissions. So you have a pop-up to allow it. So this is what we call security by default. But we have that security by default because there is a security control that prevents the access of a third application to that component. So this is complementary. You cannot just say, I only implement security by default or only security by design. You have to build security by design and then build security by default. Sorry.
Very good example.
Oh. You see? No, it was a security incident and good reaction. Thank you.
You were under attack.
Yeah. I noticed that. Thanks for reacting.
Thank you. So, Anne-Marie, we speak about the technical side. So, you think there are limitations we need to be aware that we will not solve, I think it's the message, all problems through technique, or you think we can do a lot through technique?
That's a good question. Well, I think we can do a lot, okay? But so, for instance, if you think there were two events that recently, impacted some of us, or at least, so there was this Facebook outage last week, right? And that was just due to a sort of a stupid manipulation of some network kind of table, and led to really major outage of Facebook services, but not only. Because the internet was completely messed up because of this, then this had impact on many different things, okay? Now, why? Because a huge part of the world was controlled by just one company, and then with this mistake. Now, yesterday, I think yesterday or the day before, we had an Outage OVH Outage. So OVH is a cloud provider in France, and many companies were affected by this because nothing would work for a few hours. And again, so as I think really technically speaking, I mean, and there are solutions for this, right? I mean, this is called fault resilience, basically, so that you cannot sustain having, if you have, it's like not putting all your eggs in one basket. I'm not even sure this expression exists in English, but it's clear enough, isn't it? So you have to have alternative, and in a way, internet works very well. And why? Because internet is a decentralized system by essence. And it's not subject to the things, just because when you go from one point to another, you have many different ways of doing it. And I think we should probably turn, technically speaking, to do the same. So having several alternatives. So one is what we are under today, and big companies and and stuff like certification and stuff like this. The other way is also to have alternative sort of decentralized solution, open source kind of solution, and those will not, I'm not advocating the end of those GAFAM company at all, of course, but having some good alternatives is, I think, is a healthy way of looking at things and provide good solution in the end.
Thank you. And Pascal, what is your
Well, I think on moving maybe to from the security to some of the wider solution, what I find really interesting in your approach and your comments, Anne-Marie, is to say, all right, we could put the technology somewhere, and then somehow it needs to be either enforced or implemented. So I think there's I don't know if I'm looking at it the right way, but I think there's an equation and there's an X in the middle, and maybe the X is what I would call the innovation factor, right? And the innovation, not so much in the sense of more technology, but just kind of, making something happen. I think that's how I would say innovation, which comes with, leadership, accountability, all of this good stuff that obviously needs to kind of percolate down for public and private society to be working together. I think to, take your explainable AI mentioned before, Anne-Marie, you need to decide, right? Do we want everything to have this kind of almost magical power? Honestly, Facebook is pretty cool. I talk to you about something, Anne-Marie, I go home and I have all of the ads about what we talked about. So, hey, pretty fun, right? But when this algorithm have a decision, be it a university admission, getting access to an apartment or something, I think it becomes some things where maybe the cool effect or the magical effect is a little less important, but understanding what led to the decision so that not only can we audit, as we heard this morning, but also, we can have finally human control, if we want, on top of those decisions, I think becomes really, really crucial. And I think it's similar with elements like data, for example. I mentioned before that I'm a bit frustrated by all of this talk of data, but we still haven't found a way to have, I don't know if it's like a data, coffre-fort, right? Where is my data that I can lock? Or, if you wanted to look at it maybe more in a positive way, this kind of data trust, where I entrust my data once and for all into an organization. And there the innovation is not so much the tech, because I think we have it. The organization is just the governance mechanism that will make it happen so that, I can tell my trust that, banking with X is fine, giving my medical access to Y is fine. And I think we're going to come to this, but again, I think it's the innovation piece that I would say is missing, and the innovation piece in a kind of multi-stakeholder way.
Thank you. Vincent, you mentioned that you do research also, and that you are looking for the people attempts. So can you tell us more of this kind of research about the security in your field?
Yeah, we are doing research in cybersecurity, data science, everything that relates to technologies that you need to build secure systems, and also how to protect systems. But I think if we talk about digital trust, I think one aspect we have not touched yet, and I think is important to mention, is also the trust in the information that is inputted and spread over the systems. It's not only about the trust in the technology and how to protect our data, but there is also this big issue about fake news, for example, disinformation, and this is also something that we need to tackle, because We see now developments also with Facebook, for example, the companies, social media that have business models based on fake news. So they earn money basically by spreading fake news. So these are also issues we should consider, how to deal with disinformation, how to detect it. It's a very challenging problem. Also the definition, what is fake news at all, because it can be the opinion of some persons. It's not necessarily fake news. But I think that's also the information domain is also very important about the digital trust. It's not only about the technology, but also the information that is at some point digitalized, but doesn't start digital. Yeah.
Thank you. On the technical side, if we think about technology, we think about energy. So I wonder if it's an issue. Probably yes, but maybe you can tell me more about this relation between technology and sustainability and climate and all the issues we have in relation to the climate.
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. As a matter of fact, it's a little bit all contradictory. So during the pandemic, everybody moved online, and everybody was happy with this, and then suddenly there was this, idea that now we don't need to travel anymore, so that will, decrease the carbon footprint, and instead we go on Zoom and have our meetings on Zoom. Well, it's not so clear, actually. As a matter of fact, there are some organizations which first said, okay, we're now going to do all things online, and suddenly now they're sort of reverting back because it's not that clear that it costs less, and that so yes, indeed, there is a huge energy consumption of this data center and more general of the digital world, and I'm not quite sure we can. There are some applications for which we can clearly say that they are extremely, energy consuming. Well, Bitcoin is one very good example. It's just consume, I don't know, as many energy as I don't remember the country, but it's just crazy. So yes, indeed, there is really a lot of efforts to do on this on other things. So, for instance, Bitcoin is so outrageous in terms of energy that there are some research already happening, and with lower consumption. But I think more generally, in many algorithms we can do, which could actually solve again if we go again for a. So I will, finish by having this message very clear. But if you go to very decentralized systems where your data stay where they are, it's sort of solved the problem you were mentioning. It avoids data to travel on the network, and also you have less replication of. Because I think today, whenever you send a picture on a social network, I don't know how many times it is replicated, but it's just crazy. And that is storage, so that means that this is somewhere sitting on one and even several data center, in the world that needs cooling. And so, yeah, I think we are not extremely. We are not very careful about this right now, and this is something we will have to consider more seriously, I guess.
Thank you. Do you have
I fully agree. I think we're in the dark, right? We're not sure how much we produce of emissions, whatever we do in our life, right? Yes, there's maybe a famous large company that has a fairly good map apps that tells me that I went from A to Z and I did I don't know how much, but I think we're going to have a better transparency, right? We should have a transparency, and I know that now you can calculate, for example, the size of your Outlook mailbox and attach a CO2 kind of label to it. It's not being done, right? But these are not things that are hard. So I think it goes a bit in the same argument that I had before, to say that people are going to start connecting the dots, right? They're going to start kind of caring about the environment through their entire, if you want, 360-degree life, and therefore we're going to see new business models, new areas coming, new, again, kind of traceability for elements. But where I hope we go a step further is also to use this kind of newly acquired knowledge and some of those amazing algorithms that I've seen in actions to also help those most affected by climate change. So turning a bit around your questions, I've seen, for example, when I was in the insurance industry, how, more granular, to take one of the term you used before, more granular you can become in your understanding of how climate change can be on, for example, the East Coast of the US, right? I think New York might have to redesign its city because of climate change and something like this. So my hope is that we kind of continue this kind of discussion and kind of accelerate a bit the innovation that goes with it.
Okay, so we can trust in slow technology in a way. But is it possible to make it as a requirement for security, to introduce it in the certification process, this question of sustainability, for example?
First, I want to thank you about that question. And I mean, why? Because when we talk about digital trust, we have to understand that this is not all about security, not all about privacy. Even if we have the security and the privacy, we can lose the trust by consuming a lot of energy and stuff like that. So sustainability has to take into account, we have to take into account sustainability. And especially for IoT devices, because they are made of plastic mainly, and the footprint is very, very high. Without talking about shipments, we have manufacturing in China that is shipping devices to Brazil. And this is when you come to count the carbon footprint, it's quite huge. So, and as Logitech CEO said, planting trees is not enough. So, so we need to think as a whole. To answer your question, should we integrate sustainability requirements in security? Personally, I don't believe it. Because if we can take the example of GDPR for regulation or any other security framework. This is not enough. The GDPR regulation and other certification does not stop attacks and does not make. Maybe it makes security a concern for web applications and web services, but it will not stop people attacking the devices. For me, sustainability has to come from government regulations more than security certifications.
Thank you. I would like, before giving the floor to questions, to finish in this question of thinking about solutions. And we can also see the side of governance. It was a bit what was explained before. And I think it's important to ask Vincent if cyberwarfare and warfare in the field of information, you mentioned the fake news, you mentioned the trust the information, but do you think about remedies, about solutions in the field? Do you think that the regulation, that law, that dissuasive sanctions, for example, lots amount of money or maybe jail, I don't know, in a globalized world, would be interesting to build trust?
Yeah, I think nowadays it's too easy and too interesting to be a criminal in the cyber domain. So it's so easy to win a lot of money in cyber criminality. So I think it can continue because that's what we see. That's why it's increasing, because it's a nice business model at the end. So yeah, I think we need to have some remedy. What's the remedy? It's difficult because it's an international problem. So you can have your local laws, but then if the attacker is in a country which has a different system, then it's a different story. So I think it's really a challenging problem because it's in a global. We need to solve this globally. We cannot address this in even the EU or so. So it's but I think at the moment it's too easy and the business model is too good. So we need to break this.
Okay. And Pascal, you mentioned before the collaboration between private and public sector. Could you develop on this?
Of course, yes. So to continue on this, I think it's global in the sense that it's a geopolitical and technology issue, right? And I think that's why it's so hard, right? You got different groups talking to different people. We're really happy to be in Geneva in a place where you can think about intranet governance. I think we just need to get going, right? We need to start maybe small, have some small standards, maybe a minimal group that gets started. I think the talent piece is very also went down. When I see fellowships of groups that can come from the governments to the private sector and back, I think it helps a lot. I think we won't be able to solve it on a global basis right away, right? We saw that a topic like privacy, for example, if I'm not mistaken, was not even part of the newly inaugurated Tech Trade Council discussion between the US and the EU, right? So if you're not even able to put it on the agenda, it obviously won't get solved. So I think it will require a lot more kind of maybe regional, small scale, and even in a place like here where you have some small places like some small commune, right? There's initiatives locally that looks at helping the SMEs. I'm not sure, I know Michael is sitting in his own local authority, Conseil Communal, right? But I think it's going to start local to a certain extent as well. I'm sure that now digital, that probably wasn't even the 10th topic on the agenda, hopefully will come, and hopefully this will be also helped by the fact that we have super solid cyber expertise available. So again, I think it's connecting, starting somewhere, and hopefully having the kind of willingness and leadership to expand.
Thank you. And I would ask Anne-Marie a quite direct question in this field. What do you think? Who should own and govern AI and big data?
That's how long do we have? No, well, I mean, those are two different things. I think owning an algorithm is kind of, I would say anybody can. And what would be great is that if this provides some output for some users and so that we understand them. Now, the data is really another issue. Because it can be used for so many things, and as Pascal said, it's a real mess indeed. This is all over. So I guess there are different categories. So if we think about typically medical data of people, those have to be extremely taken extremely seriously in a sense. As they can be some. You don't want any algorithm at some point to decide whether we could, loan you some money or grant some insurance just because someone has access to this data. So this is something maybe that should really, why not belong to either people or government? I would say, as long as you trust your government. Now, in terms of personal data, I really think that we should again give more control to the users, and also that there is a number of things that can be done without, really identifying data as well. So there are plenty of solutions out there to actually keep your data or transmit them only part of the ones that are going to be useful. So those are two different kind of things. But I was reading an article yesterday about the fact that AI algorithms are even more target even more the most precarious people, and that's not sensitive data. Okay, it's just maybe data that they get from the net. So we have to be careful with this. And the safest way would be not to produce any data, but at least what you can do is make sure that they do not leak when you don't want them to leak. Again, users have to be sort of educated about this, because not everybody knows that, if you still see some stories where some people would put their holiday pictures on Facebook, not knowing that when they're on, medical leave or something, whatever. So I think education also is a very important part of this.
And the role of the government in the certification, for the moment, it's the private sector certification, the guidelines given by private sector, and which role you think that the government has to play? Because we know that in some sectors, in the product security, there are guidelines given by governments, and that the certification is mandatory. You have told us about medical devices, for example. It is just not just the certification given that you pay and you have the certification. The certification is mandatory. Without this certification, you don't have access to the market. So what is your opinion on the relation between government, between mandatory and non-mandatory certification in this area? And maybe there are there is not yes or no. Maybe it's another answer you will give us.
No. Completely, it will be not yes or no because it's a complex topic. And as I said, IoT devices is composed of a lot of devices. So you cannot just say you have to secure your IoT device in this way because this will be too costly and too expensive for some kind of devices. So we need to understand how we can split devices per family. Which devices should comply with local regulations. And as we know, we cannot, this is difficult to have international regulations to make comply all devices to a single standard. So yeah, it's a complex topic, and hopefully tomorrow manufacturers will not only promote and advertise on camera lens performances, wireless range, but also on how trust has been built by design. Maybe it will be.
Thank you very much. I think it's now time to give the audience the occasion to ask questions, and in the room or maybe on the internet.
Are there any? Thank you. So starting with when Pascal mentioned that 98% of data is in the US, one questioner started asking whether, kind of building on these certification questions, whether being based in Switzerland is not enough to attract customers in the absence of deeper international certifications, that Switzerland might benefit from these by making the highest standards in the world, and going on to wonder whether powerful countries can kind of go dark and impact the validity of the security certifications in the area of data and metadata confidentiality, whether these can be weakened by powerful nation states in regards to the validity of these certifications.
Is it for me?
There's a few more.
Thank you very much. Great question. No, I think I'll say a couple of things. Is first, the way I understand this kind of US dominance of data is just because if you're building up a startup, which I've helped do a couple of times, is as soon as you turn on any kind of lights on your computer, you're going to be faced with any application that go through the US, right? I think there's no debate about it. So if there's a supremacy, I wouldn't put it necessarily on a powerful nation state. I would put it more on a concentration of data based on really kind of private companies that have built businesses, right, software as a service or whatnot going on. Now, if we want to be creative in the future, I think we'll have to think about methodology, approaches, governance, or even entities that might actually be kind of safeguarding data somewhere, right? And we had this great conversation yesterday with one of the future speakers on this panel, so I let her expand on this, on data embassy, which I found really, really interesting, right? And I think data embassy, or maybe data neutrality, whatever you want to call it, I think there's a role for Switzerland to do that. I don't think we've been super successful by just putting servers in bunkers in the middle of nowhere in the mountains, but I think, again, maybe with Web3 coming up, there's a chance for Switzerland to kind of connect the decentralization, the fact that it needs some certification and still some sort of authority to kind of, give value to this data and kind of play a role moving forward on that.
Thank you. Do you have other questions?
Yes, yes. From a nation-state point of view, what is the best option to establish and maintain the trust of citizens and residents of a certain country in case of cyber operations by another state? Is it building reliable, high-tech cyber defenses? Is it deterrence? Is it the capacity to retaliate? What should the priorities be in this regard?
Can you repeat the options?
Well, I'm sure you know them, but is it building reliable, high-tech cyber defenses? Is it deterrence? Is it the capacity to retaliate? What should be the priorities? So offense or defense?
Well, I think it's not something that is specific to digital or cyber. I think it's something that you need to see more globally. So this cyber or the digital world is just another dimension. So at the end, you should do the same. Depends a little bit on the strategy of the country, what is best, neutral state or whatever your situation is. But as I mentioned before, I mean, cyber or digital is just another. It's just another dimension. At the end, it's if you think about conflicts, they are usually not performed only on one dimension. But typically, cyber is often the first step. Because there it's easy to stay stealthy, so and it doesn't escalate. You have a lot of conflicts that are also performed before an escalation is really going on. So I think that's typically the first space where you see some type of conflict. But otherwise, I think it should not be specific to the digital world.
So we have time for questions, maybe one from the audience here. I think there's someone there.
Okay, right. And I believe it was you, Pascal, who mentioned the issue of internet governance. My question will be how to organize and imagine a governance when data are everywhere and nowhere. I mean, no one has is proprietary of data and is managing data. How to organize it?
Yeah, I think you're the student, right? So you should join the fight and help us develop the governance. But I think, joke aside, someone mentioned this morning the airline industry, right? There's planes everywhere, there's planes taking off, and there's physical goods moving, right, in a lot of places. And we have containers, right? The container is pretty amazing because it allows element A to go to element B in a way that, again, is standardized, right? So I think my intuition, if you want, it's not even more refined than this, is that I think we'll find a way to do the same thing with data, to take data. Or again, as we're building up this infrastructure of the digital economy tomorrow, we'll find ways to encapsulate, if you want, the knowledge, the security, and the standardization that will go forward. So I think it's just going to be a bit difficult. And I gave an example in my intro, for example, about central bank digital currencies, right? CBDCs. You got different models. I won't go through them. Is it an account based with a central bank? Is it using intermediaries? So you got a lot of these kind of different elements. I would say almost fighting for relevance. And my understanding is it's going to be a mix between those kind of low scale, low risk, kind of almost attempts, if you want, or exploration, and a top-down approach to say, well, we still need to have our sovereignty around our currency, right? Because if crypto becomes the norm and even the US dollar doesn't exist anymore, then I think you'll have a lot of, there's going to be a red line in the sand somewhere.
But can we also say that the analogy with goods is limited? I'm thinking that goods are transported by containers that have standardized dimensions. When data, there is no norm or rules. We have the deep web, the web,
yeah,
every shape, every form. We have no non-standardized ways to communicate.
Yeah, I'll tee it up for Anne-Marie, hopefully to save me out of this one. But I think in the sense, we let it happen, right? I did the exercise recently during a workshop to see where my Facebook data is and what it is and what it knows about me, but we let it happen because we didn't, care enough to give our data, and the government didn't maybe care enough just to say that, maps were done without any return back to what's going on. So if this was kind of Web 1.0 or Web 2.0 with social media, I think Web 3.0 might be very different. And that's where maybe coming back to your analogy, we'll be able to define and tag data. I don't have any more kind of crypto, maybe the cryptographer can help me, but to define and to say that whatever I'm producing can be somehow represented in a way that's similar to the physical good, right? And therefore traceable and therefore taxable. Digital taxes are going to be interesting. So I think there's going to be new ways to do it.
So you are imagining a solution where data have a value, in fact, is monetized, that have a value?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think it's, well, again, as you said, we are not even careful enough, right? Right now, there is all this regulation about data, and yet, even though, we still, scrolling down our phone, and then you have to accept everything to get what you want to do, and you do it, right? And even I do it, right? And I'm like advertising, that we care about privacy and stuff like this. So it's very much, again, we're gonna change, and the regulation will change, and hopefully we'll have this time. Actually, going to your idea, using some kind of proof of ownership for a number of, there exists some sort of.
Is it feasible? Does it exist?
Well, no, but it's a great line of research, actually.
Great.
Thank you. There was one question there.
Yeah, so my question will probably be a follow-up on what has the conversation that has just been initiated. By the way, I'm working in the blockchain space, so my questions will revolve around this topic. First, I just want to come back to something you said on the fact that Bitcoin is consuming energy like crazy, almost as much as big countries like Switzerland are consuming. I think we need to moderate this in the sense that Bitcoin is using a majority of green energy. So it's kind of helping as well, the green energy industry to develop, especially in some poor countries. And also the fact that all the next generation blockchains are not using the so-called proof of work, consensus algorithm. So from this perspective, they are using way less energy. Okay, and also the fact that if you say, okay, Bitcoin is using a lot of energy, you should not compare this to zero, but to the energy all the banks are actually using in their private data centers. That being said, my question was
This is precisely why I said Bitcoin and not blockchain. I know that there are plenty of alternatives that are, greener.
Yeah. But I mean, even Bitcoin itself is not that polluting. No, my question was more around decentralized identities. It was mentioned earlier that one way to secure systems is to have them as decentralized as possible. So this applies to many facets of security. Here I'm thinking of security of identities, which could be the first, step towards, maybe a future where people could probably take back ownership of not only their identities but also their private data. As a way to counter all these threats that you mentioned earlier. So my question is this one: how do you see the evolution of the initiatives that we have seen in the past years around the decentralized identities? How do you see these technologies evolve in the future? And maybe the role that governments like the Swiss government can play to foster the adoption of such technologies, assuming they are beneficial to everyone.
Shall I? Yeah. Well, yeah, I think this is actually something that is, very promising. And when I was talking about proof of ownership and everything, this is exactly what I had in mind. So now there is a question of adoption, right? I've been working for ages on peer-to-peer systems, and interestingly enough, when they came out, which we were talking 2000, it would be really hard for people to actually adopt those technology. They wouldn't run anything on their, they would give away all the data to someone that they wouldn't trust, but not put something on their computer. Now we evolved toward different thing, and as a matter of fact, Bitcoin, from that point of view, was the killer app of peer-to-peer application. So I'm really thinking that what we put together like 20 years ago, technically speaking, plus the new technology can now become the new backbone of sort of decentralized world. So I'm still very much on this side, actually.
I would fully agree. I think, in between self-sovereign identity or other kind of similar way of thinking, we got all of the pieces, if you want. I think identity needs to be purpose or fit for purpose, right? I don't want my identity in a specific context to be the same as in another context. So making it programmable, making it designed for what it needs to do, I think is essential. But again, I don't think it's a technology issue. I think it's an adoption issue. I think it might be also just a general education issue. Again, I wasn't in Switzerland when the vote took place, so I cannot, understand and analyze what happened. But I think it's really important to see, where the vulnerabilities are in the system. Is it just the biometric? Is it the fact that, I can be hacked online? I mean, all of these kind of things happen in the physical world as well. So I think it's again, back to some of the earlier comment, a place where we need to make sure that we elevate the technology kind of understanding of people and not mix it with kind of magical element, but just say, no, it's technology for citizens, by citizens, where the adoption is essential. Because I agree with you, I think identity, I was talking about CBDC just before, we won't be having any digital Swiss francs in our cell phone until we have a solution there.
So thank you very much. I think we are slowly at the end of the panel. It's now time to conclude. What is the message that you would like the audience to take away from our conversation in 1 minute? I begin with you, Nabil.
Yeah, no. I think that the battle of tomorrow will be promoting and advertising trust in order to compete with others and at least to establish trust within the landscape of devices and web services. And for me, this is that will happen tomorrow, I believe.
Yeah, I can completely agree, and I think, this panel was also about the long-term horizon, 5, 10, maybe 20 years. But I think we can do there are a lot of quick wins, and we can do small steps to improve quite a lot, and that's what we should start doing.
You stole my point. I think we can start doing the cocktail part. This was my point. I think we got some decentralized people, we got large companies, we got the EPFL represented. So why don't we try to start do something together? Because in between all of the initiative, Trust Valley and others, I think we have a lot happening in this part of the world. So again, I think it's the starting somewhere and getting a bit this dynamism going. And I hope Anne-Marie will agree and add to it.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Plus, I'm on the optimistic side, right? So I would, I think that I trust that eventually we will get there. And we will, trust the digital world as much as we trust a plane when we, hop on a plane. And without necessarily understanding how it works. So I'm optimistic.
So thank you very much. On that note, I would like to propose you to join me to thanking this fantastic panel, and also to thank the Graduate Institute, the Center for Trade and Economic Integration, who hosted us perfectly, the C4DT of the EPFL, who is co-organizing the event. And thank you very much, and see you soon for the discussion about this topic. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for an excellent panel and for ending on an optimistic note. That's always nice. We get caught in a lot of the challenges, but it's good also to be optimistic about what the future will bring. So now, I should apologize. We didn't get through all of the questions. I will pass them on to the panelists. There were a lot of more questions about certifications and others that I will pass on. But right now, please join us for a coffee break up in the cafeteria. Go up the stairs and go straight, and you need your little badge to show that you've been, that you have your COVID certificate. At 3:30, we'll have the high-level panel on how to build digital trust going forward from 3:30 to 5, and then after that, we'd like to invite you to join us for cocktails. That will be in the restaurant on the 8th floor of Pedal 5, so you leave, go to Pedal 5 and on the 8th floor, and we'll look forward to seeing you there to celebrate the end of an excellent day. Thank you.